Bismillah, I whisper, the word trembling on my lips. In the name of Allah, I begin this confession. I need to tell someone, even if it's only the walls of this empty room, because the weight of my sins feels like it's crushing my chest. My name is Fatima al-Badri. I am 27 years old, a Muslim, a half Indian, half Iraqi. I am a nanny in a country where everything feels foreign, even myself. When I left Iraq, my mother cried for 3 days. Ya binti, she wailed, clutching my hands. Do not forget who you are. Do not let their world swallow you. My father stood by, silent as always, his hands calloused from years of labor, his face hard with disapproval. It was my brothers who pushed me to leave, their dreams riding on my ability to send money back home. Alhamdulillah, they said when I got the job in Canada. A wealthy family, 3 people, a big house, and a promise of safety. I was grateful too, at first. Mr. Williams, the husband, is rarely home. He works in finance and travels frequently. When he is around, he greets me politely but treats me like a shadow, present but unseen. Their son, Liam, is a curious 3-year-old who asks 1,000 questions. And then there's Mary. Mary Williams is unlike any woman I have ever met. Her beauty is quiet, soft blonde hair, pale skin that flushes easily, and eyes that seem to see straight through you. She is kind, always thanking me for my work, always asking if I'm comfortable. She spends her days at the computer, working on something she never quite explains. For the first 3 months, life was predictable. I cooked, cleaned, and cared for Liam. I kept my prayers, wore my hijab, and followed the rules of my faith as best as I could. But then, little by little, things began to change. It started with Maria's compliments. You're amazing, Fatima. I don't know how I'd manage without you. Her words were innocent enough, but they lingered longer than they should have. Then came the touches, a hand on my shoulder, a brush of fingers against mine. I told myself they were nothing, just gestures of kindness. But one afternoon, while Liam napped and Mr. Williams was away, Mary invited me to sit with her in the living room. She poured herself a glass of wine and offered me water. Relax, Fatima, she said, her smile warm. You are always working so hard. You deserve a break. I hesitated but sat down. My mother's voice echoed in my head, warning me to be careful. Mary leaned closer, her eyes locking with mine. Do you ever think about what you want, Fatima? Not what your family wants or what your religion says, but you. Her question unsettled me. What I wanted had never mattered. My life had always been about duty, to my family, to Allah. I didn't know how to answer her. She smiled again, softer this time. It's okay. You don't have to say anything. The conversation should have ended there, but it didn't. Over the next few days, Mary sought me out more often. She asked about my life in Iraq, about my dreams and fears. She seemed fascinated by my henna, by the way I tied my hijab, by the small rituals that tethered me to my faith. One evening, while we prepared dinner together, she reached for my hand. Your hands are beautiful, she said, tracing the lines of henna with her fingertips. I pulled away, my heart racing. Astaghfirullah, I muttered under my breath, asking Allah for forgiveness even though I hadn't done anything. But the truth was, her touch didn't feel wrong. It felt electric. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying her words and touches in my mind. I prayed for strength, for clarity, for the courage to resist whatever was happening between us. But resistance was harder than I thought. Before I continue with my confession, please make sure you subscribe to my channel and remember to drop how you feel about the story. Thank you. Now I must continue. For days, I avoided Mary as much as possible. I threw myself into work, keeping busy with Liam's endless energy and the chores that never seemed to end. I thought distance would help, that if I ignored the fire she had ignited in me, it would burn itself out. But Mary didn't let it. Fatima, she called one afternoon while I was folding laundry in the living room. Liam was napping, and the house was eerily quiet except for the hum of the washing machine. Yes? I replied, keeping my eyes on the clothes in front of me. Come sit with me for a moment, she said, patting the couch beside her. I hesitated. I have work to do. She sighed, a hint of frustration in her voice. Fatima, you never take a break. Please, just sit with me. 5 minutes. Reluctantly, I sat, leaving a safe distance between us. She smiled, handing me a glass of water. Do you ever think about what you deserve? She asked, her tone soft but pointed. I frowned. I don't understand. You work so hard for everyone else, your family, us. But what about you? Don't you think you deserve some happiness too? Her words unsettled me, pricking at something deep inside me. I am happy, I said, though the statement felt hollow. She reached for my hand, her thumb brushing against my palm. I don't think you are. I froze, the weight of her gaze spinning me in place. My mind screamed at me to pull away, but my body betrayed me, leaning ever so slightly toward her. Mary, She silenced me with a kiss, her lips warm and soft against mine. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't think. Then, as if on instinct, I kissed her back. It wasn't like the kisses I had imagined as a young girl, the innocent daydreams of a husband and wife. This was something else entirely. Fierce, consuming, and terrifyingly real. When we finally pulled apart, she cupped my face in her hands, her eyes searching mine. Say something, she whispered. I can't, I said, my voice breaking. This is wrong. Haram. It doesn't feel wrong, she said, her thumb brushing against my cheek. But it did. Even as my body betrayed me, my heart screamed in protest. I pulled away, stumbling to my feet. I need to go. I fled to my room, locking the door behind me. My heart raced as I fell to my knees, tears streaming down my face. Ya Allah, forgive me, I whispered, my voice trembling. I am weak. I have failed you. For days, I avoided Mary entirely. I prayed more fervently than ever, hoping to cleanse myself of the guilt that clung to me like a second skin. But no matter how hard I prayed, I couldn't forget the way her lips had felt against mine, The way her touch had awakened something I didn't know existed. When Mr. Williams returned from his trip, I thought things would go back to normal. His presence should have been a barrier, a reminder of the boundaries that should never be crossed. But it wasn't. One evening, while he was working late in his study and Liam was asleep, Mary found me in the kitchen. She stood in the doorway, her arms crossed over her chest, her eyes filled with a determination I hadn't seen before. "We need to talk," she said. "There's nothing to talk about," I replied, my hands trembling as I scrubbed a plate. "Fatima, look at me." I hesitated, then turned to face her. "I can't stop thinking about you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mary, please," I said, my voice cracking. "This has to stop." "I don't want it to stop," she said, stepping closer. "And I don't think you do either." Before I could respond, she closed the distance between us, her hands cupping my face as she kissed me again. This time, I didn't pull away. We ended up on the couch, our bodies tangled together, the weight of our actions forgotten in the heat of the moment. Her hands roamed over my body, exploring places no one had ever touched. She whispered things that made my cheeks burn, her voice like honey dripping into my ears. When it was over, I lay in her arms, staring at the ceiling. The guilt returned almost immediately, heavier than before. "I can't do this," I said, sitting up. "Fatima." "I'm leaving," I said, cutting her off. "I'll finish the week, but I can't stay here." Her face fell, and for a moment she looked like she might cry. "Please don't go," she said, her voice trembling. "I need you." But I shook my head, my decision made. "I need to find myself again, Mary. I'm sorry." That night, I wrote my resignation letter, my tears smudging the ink as I explained my decision. I didn't know where I would go or what I would do, but I knew I couldn't stay. As I lay in bed, my grandmother's words echoed in my mind, "Do not let their world swallow you." I had let it, and now I had to find a way back to myself, a way back to Allah, the Merciful. Please like and subscribe to this channel for more stories like this.